Ever get the feeling that, like, the world's becoming one of those choose-your-own-adventure books?
Hmm, interesting.
But instead of, like, turning the page, we're kind of building the plot with technology, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
Which is kind of what we're looking at today.
Right.
We've got this fascinating YouTube video transcript,
Okay.
and it dives into how Ayn Rand, the novelist, became a surprising influence on Silicon Valley
Interesting.
and on this thing called the Californian ideology.
Yeah, that's a fascinating connection.
It's pretty wild,
I
right?
think you wouldn't think that a novelist who died in 1981 would be shaping the tech world of the 90s.
Yeah.
But ideas, they can have a long tail,
Yeah,
especially powerful ones.
totally.
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with Ayn Rand herself.
Okay.
Her philosophy, objectivism, is all about individual freedom,
Mm-hmm.
rational self-interest,
Right.
and rejecting external control.
Yeah.
Stuff like government regulations or religious dogma,
Yeah.
that's going to resonate with certain types, right?
Absolutely. Especially after the economic turmoil of the 1930s. Her ideas were seen as radical by many.
Yeah.
But for entrepreneurs, especially those who saw themselves as innovators and disruptors,
Yeah.
her focus on individual achievement and limited government interference was incredibly appealing.
And get this, the source mentions that before she was famous, Rand actually worked as an extra in Cecil B. DeMille's Hollywood films.
Wow.
It's the ultimate system, right? But here she is championing the individual within it.
It does make you wonder how those experiences shaped her thinking.
Yeah.
Did working within a system that she seemingly rejected give her a unique perspective? It's hard to say,
Yeah,
but definitely adds a layer of complexity to her story.
for sure. To really get Rand's impact, we've got to talk about her novels.
Okay.
Take The Fountainhead. It's got this architect, Howard Rourke, who refuses to compromise his vision,
Right.
even if it means going against the grain. He's the quintessential Randian hero, totally independent,
Yeah.
driven by his own internal compass.
That's the archetype that really resonated with Silicon Valley entrepreneurs.
Right.
They saw themselves as modern-day Howard Rourkes,
Yeah.
challenging the status quo, building their empires on their own terms.
Right.
The individual versus the system. That's a core theme here.
It's wild how influential her work became.
It really is.
The source even mentions a Library of Congress survey that ranked Atlas Shrugged as the second most influential book in America,
Wow.
right behind the Bible. That's a serious following.
Atlas Shrugged in particular became almost like a Bible for some in Silicon Valley.
Wow.
They weren't just reading it for fun, they were extracting business principles from it.
Yeah.
This idea of the prime mover, the individual who drives progress, really took hold.
The video even gives specific examples like Larry Ellison of Oracle. He was a huge Rand fan.
Right.
And even structured Oracle's competitive, individualistic corporate culture
Mm-hmm.
based on those principles. And then there's the whole thing about people naming their kids
Yeah.
and companies after Rand characters. It's like she sparked a movement.
It went beyond simple fandom. It was more like her philosophy became deeply intertwined with the identity
Yeah.
and aspirations of Silicon Valley. That's the power of ideas that can shape entire industries.
And this brings us to the Californian ideology. It's this idea that emerged in the 90s that interconnected computer networks
Yeah.
could create order without traditional control mechanisms like government. This cybernetic dream
It's fascinating.
where individual freedom
Right.
and tech progress create a utopian society
Yeah.
that essentially runs itself.
It's an interesting paradox, isn't it? Rand's emphasis on radical individualism coexisting with this belief in the self-organizing power of systems.
Yeah, it's like they believed technology could both liberate the individual
Yeah.
and create a new form of social order at the same time.
Yeah, it's interesting.
The source even talks about this experiment from 1991, where a computer engineer named Lauren Carpenter
Okay.
created a giant palm game controlled by the audience.
Oh.
Each half of the room controlled a paddle,
Interesting.
electively through their individual choices.
Huh.
No one was in charge. Yet this spontaneous order emerged, and the game actually worked.
That's a powerful illustration of how individual actions, when networked together, can create surprising emergent patterns.
Yeah.
And this is precisely what the Californian ideology saw in the internet.
Yeah.
Millions of individuals making independent choices,
Yeah.
but somehow forming a global network that functions with remarkable stability.
Yeah.
At least that was the optimistic view.
Right, and the source is full of quotes reflecting this utopian vision. All the mechanisms we're creating are connecting everything to everything else. They let the individual do their thing, and the internet, as it spreads, will radically accelerate network formation. A different kind of global governance, really. The fundamental evolution of the global system.
Wow.
It's almost like a technological manifest destiny.
But it's crucial to consider the context. This was happening right as a new U.S. president who strongly believed in traditional political power was elected.
Mm-hmm.
This set the stage for a potential clash
Right.
between these two visions of how society should work.
Yeah.
A clash that's still playing out today.
Totally.
Yeah.
So we've got Ayn Rand's influence on Silicon Valley, the rise of the Californian ideology, this whole cybernetic dream thing.
Yeah.
But how did it actually play out in the real world?
Well, imagine the internet exploding in popularity.
Yeah.
Tech companies booming.
Right.
And this belief that technology could solve anything gaining serious traction.
Uh-huh.
The big question became, what is the role of government in this new interconnected world?
Right.
The Californian ideology leaned towards government taking a back seat,
Yeah.
letting these networks evolve organically.
Yeah, it's like they thought we've got the internet to connect us and coordinate our actions. Who needs all these old school rules and regulations? It was almost as if government was seen as this outdated system holding back progress.
But governing a complex society isn't that simple.
Right.
Technology, even when it's powerful, doesn't automatically solve every problem.
Yeah.
In fact, sometimes it creates new ones.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you start to see friction between the techno-utopian vision and the reality of how things actually work.
And don't forget, this is happening with a new U.S. president who had very different ideas about government's role.
Yeah.
The source mentions he was a big believer in traditional power structures and strong leadership. He saw government as a vital force for shaping society and tackling its challenges.
Exactly. So you have this clash of ideologies.
Mm-hmm.
The Californian ideology with its faith in decentralized networks and individual choice versus a more traditional view that emphasizes the need for centralized authority and government intervention.
It wasn't just a theoretical debate either, right?
No.
It started to show up in real-world issues,
Yeah.
like how the internet should be regulated and controlled.
Right.
The Californian ideology pushed for a hands-off approach, letting the internet develop freely without government interference.
But others saw potential dangers in this unfettered growth.
Right.
They worried about things like privacy violations,
Yeah.
misinformation spreading like wildfire, and a few tech giants becoming too powerful.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, looking back, those concerns weren't totally unfounded.
No kidding. The internet can be used for good or bad, and we've all seen how lack of regulation can have some pretty nasty unintended consequences.
Yeah.
The source material doesn't get into specifics, but it's clear that the optimistic view of the Californian ideology started to hit some serious roadblocks.
It's like they underestimated the complexities of human behavior,
Yeah.
how technology could be used in ways they never anticipated. And this is where things get really interesting,
Okay.
because these same tensions start to play out in debates about net neutrality, data privacy, the role of social media in our lives, and things we're still wrestling with today.
It's like the seeds of those debates were planted way back in the 90s when these competing visions of the future first collided. So what does it all mean? What can we learn from digging into this history?
Well, first, it's a good reminder that technology is never neutral.
Right.
It's shaped by the people who create it,
Yeah.
their values, their visions for the future.
Yeah.
The Californian ideology coming from Ayn Rand's philosophy had a huge impact on the internet
Yeah.
and the entire tech industry.
And sure, some of the Californian ideology might seem naive or overly optimistic now,
Right.
but it also contributed to a lot of good things.
Yeah.
Think about how it helped democratize information, led to the rise of online communities, and allowed us to connect with people all over the world. It's a complicated legacy with both positive and negative sides.
Definitely. And perhaps the most important takeaway is that we need to be more critical and thoughtful about technology's role in our lives. We can't just blindly embrace every new gadget or buy into utopian visions of the future. We need to have informed discussions, weigh the potential benefits and risks, and make conscious choices about the kind of society we want to build in this digital age.
Well said. And speaking of conscious choices, that's where we'll pick up in part 3. We'll explore what all of this means for the future and what questions we should be asking ourselves as we navigate this ever-changing technological landscape.
All right, so we've gone from Ayn Rand's philosophy to the inner workings of Silicon Valley,
Right.
explored the rise of the Californian ideology, and even grappled with some of its real-world consequences.
Yeah.
Now for the grand finale.
Okay.
Let's talk about the future.
This deep dive has really brought up some thought-provoking questions.
Right.
If technology really can create order from individual choices, like the Californian ideology suggests what happens to the role of government?
Right.
What happens when the cybernetic dream bumps up against the messiness of human nature?
Yeah.
Where does all this lead us?
Those are some big questions.
They are.
And honestly, I don't think there are easy answers.
But that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating.
Yeah.
We're basically in uncharted territory, figuring it out as we go.
Exactly, and that's why critical thinking is more important than ever.
Mm-hmm.
We can't just sit back and passively accept whatever new tech comes along.
Right.
We need to be actively involved in shaping the future we want.
Absolutely. We need to ask ourselves, what values do we want to prioritize in this digital age?
Yeah,
How can we make sure technology serves humanity instead of the other way around?
right.
How do we balance individual freedom with the need for collective action and responsibility?
Those are excellent questions, and they're not just for tech experts or policymakers to figure out.
Right.
Technology affects every aspect of our lives, so we all have a stake in shaping its future.
You know what strikes me?
What's that?
It's like we're back to that choose your own adventure idea we talked about at the beginning,
Huh?
except now we're not just reading the story, we're writing it.
Yeah.
Like every click, every technological choice we make.
That's a great analogy. And the ending isn't predetermined.
Right.
It depends on the choices we make collectively.
Yeah.
The more informed and engaged we are, the better equipped we'll be to navigate this complex technological landscape and steer towards a future that benefits everyone.
Well said. So to our listener out there,
Yeah.
I'll leave you with this. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep pushing for a future where technology empowers us all to live more meaningful and fulfilling lives.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
This deep dive may be over, but the conversation is just beginning.